Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I know a lot of this is about a sports track, so we're here to bring a little bit of gaming into your lives. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Nadia Tseng. I'm a VP of Strategic Partnerships over at Loaded. I oversee our brand consultancy firm, which basically means I help brands execute and build gaming strategies. So it's brands like Gillette, it's brands like Spotify, it's brands like McLaren. And then before this, I was a baseball marketing agent at CAA. So really excited to talk about the intersection of gaming and sports. And Lindsey also has an amazing resume that intersects both of those. So yeah, introduce yourself.
Cool, thanks for having me. So Lindsey Eckhouse, I'm the Director of Licensing and Digital Products for McLaren Racing. So McLaren is a Formula One team. We also race in IndyCar, Formula E, and then this all-electric race series called Extreme E, and lastly in F1 Esports, so sim racing. So gaming is really germane to what we do across all these series. I come from the NFL, so worked at the NFL for about 8 years, and then after that went to a top multi-team esports club out of Berlin called G2 that I expect everyone here to know who they are, but they compete in esports like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, stuff like that. So I've had a career that's gone from traditional sports into the gaming and esports world, and now McLaren, I kind of bring it back all together.
Yeah, so me personally, I know that when I left CAA, I had a lot of people questioning me, maybe even doubting me as to why I was leaving a really awesome opportunity representing some of the best athletes in the world to go to gaming, this world that they didn't know that much about. I have not regretted my decision for a second. I'm very happy with my decision. But it is an interesting industry switch that, again, people were a little confused of when I did it. So I'd love to hear more about why you made that switch from the NFL to G2, and yeah.
Yeah, I similarly got a lot of crazy looks. I think my boss at the time was like, "The fuck are you doing?" And I was like, "Okay, this maybe this is a mistake," but haven't looked back. Feel like it was the right move. So I think the power of traditional sports, right, is it brings people together, but you always have a little bit of a barrier in terms of who's competing from like an athlete perspective. And if you look at esports and just gaming more generally, what attracted me to it initially was those barriers kind of go away. So in a lot of ways, anyone from anywhere in the world can compete together. So you're getting rid of that geographic barrier. There's technical issues to that, but that's going probably too granular. But then second, from a skill set perspective, it levels the playing field, or should, between women and men. And I thought that was really exciting to be a part of. And then the last thing for me was we're going from a linear-based entertainment vehicle, which is traditional sports, so TV-based viewership primarily at the time, to esports, which is all media, all digital. And the kind of more I dug into it, the more I realized it's this biggest thing that I really didn't know about. So if you look at League of Legends globally, their world championship sees about 350 million people tune in around the world. By way of comparison, that's more than the Champions League. That is more than the Super Bowl. So that is a huge amount of people tuning into this. So we should give a shit. It is a big deal.
Totally. I would also say, like, with a lot of the traditional leagues, it's been going on for a long time. The systems are there, the processes are there, how they function are all pretty systemic to what that league is. And for me, gaming was, and it still is in some ways, the wild, wild west, where there's so much to innovate and there's something that you can grow with, right? And so I will always have a special place for my experience at CAA and baseball and love all of that. But it's really hard to look back with any sort of regret when we are seeing the industry shape the way it is. So it's been an awesome experience.
Yeah, totally agree. It's just exploding still.
Yeah. So you have a really interesting background in esports, and then also now with McLaren Shadow and kind of what we see as like capital G gaming, that's all encompassing and what gaming means culturally. I think a lot of people who are not in gaming see esports and gaming as the same exact thing, right? The type of person who games, everyone's thinking of kind of that same person, but it's really much broader than that. So I'd love to get your take on like how you define esports and how you define gaming on the larger sense, and like where that commercial opportunity lies.
Yeah, it's a good question. So gaming is casual video gameplay, right? So if you play Candy Crush on your phone, that's technically gaming. If you play Fortnite, that's gaming. If you play on a console PS5, like my husband does, and plays FIFA or Madden, like that's gaming. Once you put that into a competitive structure, that's esports. And I think interestingly, esports really started as a marketing vehicle for a lot of publishers that made big video games. So if you look back 20, 30 years when esports started, it was community led, and people that were gaming were basically saying, why don't we organize our own competitions and start seeing who's better and competing against each other? And that sort of caught on. Publishers noticed it and thought, this is actually a great way for us to market our video game to new people. Let's really lean into that. And that's how esports started. So it's this marketing vehicle, right, for publishers. And why I think that's important to mention is it is not yet widely profitable because it's still so much of a marketing mechanism. And it's almost like the industry is building the plane while flying the plane. So kind of figuring out how to make that market while they're going forward with it. So you haven't seen broadcast deals in the traditional sense of sports rights holders catch up, in esports. So the Twitches of the world, the YouTube gamings of the world, they're not dropping as much cash on, some of these massive esports tournaments yet. Whereas in casual gaming, Fortnite, Roblox, all of these other games that really engage hundreds of millions of people on a regular basis, they're seeing huge amounts of commercial return through in-game skin purchases, through different brands activating inside their sort of worlds. And so that's where I see more commercial opportunity. So at McLaren, we compete in F1 esports, which is the sort of sim racing version of the real life racing experience. So EA published the game. It's a small audience. It's never going to be as big as Formula One. So then we look at how do we show up as McLaren really authentically in games, and that's where Open World and Loaded are helping us out a ton. So we're looking at, who are the publishers that we should collaborate with. We launched our F1 car a year and a half ago, 2 years ago rather, inside Roblox, first sort of team to do that. And what was amazing is we saw basically a 60% increase in audience in Roblox just from us being there. So we know our fans love this space and want to engage in this space, and it's just a new way to sort of get in front of them.
Yeah, I think the other really interesting distinction between the two of those is, right, you talk about esports and a Valorant team or the League of Legends team, right? Like, your target demo are people who play those games. I think when you zoom out and you look at gaming more broadly, our kind of thesis at like Open World and we're helping brands is gaming culture is Gen Z culture and vice versa, right? If you want to have a Gen Z strategy and, target younger audiences, you need to have a gaming strategy, right? So understanding like all of the publishers, all of the esports, but also what gaming means culturally to the younger generation, right? The same way that when we were all younger, and still to this day, wearing the sports teams that we rep, now it's like the creator merch. Yes, there's all of the G2 jerseys and the FaZe jerseys that are out there, but also like the individual creator merch. These streamers who sit at their computer and play Minecraft 10 hours a day to a younger audience, and they're excited to wear that guy's T-shirt the minute it drops, right? So. Gaming really is just so all-encompassing, and that's why I think the opportunity is so vast in either of those lanes.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is if you look at gaming as an industry, it's bigger than fashion and film combined. So it is, as you said, synonymous with culture. And we're almost seeing these cultural icons kind of emerge that are gamers, creators that sit behind a screen for 12 hours, and we think that's wild. But the younger audience loves it. And I get it, right? If you're really into, football or golf, you'll probably watch a lot of videos to try to figure out how to get better at that, right? So it's a similar concept. If you're thinking of, okay, I love Fortnite, this game is mega, how do I get better at it? You're gonna watch these influencers that are awesome at it and start to really follow them and love them and then buy their merch, and then boom, you're in that world, you're in the gaming world.
Totally, and I think like YouGov had a really interesting survey data saying they surveyed teens what types of influencers are you following the most? Gaming influencers were number one, and it was much farther down was athletes. And I think that this is really interesting because, when someone is live streaming, right? That's a really personal relationship that you have with this influencer you're following, right? It's 8 hours a day. You know how they talk. You know what makes them tick. You know what's going on in their day. So we kind of liken it to like streaming on Twitch as if LeBron James had a video and a microphone hooked up to him the whole time. By the way, your chat can be asking LeBron questions in real time and he could be answering them, right? That's a really intimate relationship that you have with this influencer. And so with this younger generation, it's so fascinating because I think, Gen Z longs for this kind of, this realness, this intimacy, this, they really, really have fatigue of like what's meant to be perfect, right? So when you get to these gaming influencers, you have this opportunity to know them deeply, right? So that relationship is so important. And then think about the communities that they have and then how brands, hopefully the right way, go in and are able to leverage that, show up authentically, and then give back to that community. So.
Yeah. It's just it's a new kind of entertainment vehicle. And at the end of the day, sports competes with gaming, competes with film in terms of share of attention. And so this is just a different method to really penetrate a different audience.
Yeah, I'm curious if you've seen any other like stats related to this being at the NFL and working at McLaren, right? So, why is fandom amongst the younger generation for sports teams going down? I read one article that was really interesting talking about how so much of that fandom exists when you go to a game when you're younger, when you have parents or family that take you, and then you all of a sudden have this stronghold with what the Dodgers are doing or what all these teams are doing. And today, it's so expensive to get to arenas and to get to stadiums that kids aren't having those same experiences and are losing that fandom. I'm not sure if there's anything that you've seen, whether it's been at the NFL or McLaren, in that realm.
Yeah, it's a good question. So fortunately, Formula One is experiencing the reverse right now, and a lot of that has to do with Netflix's show Drive to Survive, which hopefully a few people here have seen, because I know Austin is a hell of a great market for us to race in. Yes, see some fans over there. I hope you're a McLaren fan. If you're a Red Bull fan, get out. I'm kidding. Drive to Survive has been unbelievable for what it's done for the sport, and it's particularly brought in like 18 to 34-year-olds into it. And I think it's because it just demystified the sport, right? Formula One is this super European, super expensive, complicated, confusing thing that maybe a lot of Americans knew happened. And now it's almost this thing that's happening at our doorstep in Austin, in Miami, this year also in Las Vegas. And even if you can't get there, you can watch the drama from the season every March when Netflix's show drops, or you can now watch it on all of the different broadcasters, highlights on YouTube, etc. So it almost takes consumption behavior from the fan perspective, like that short, fast, give it to me now, and give me something different that helps me understand the sport and breaks it down for them. So I think Formula One has really benefited from that, and us as McLaren see huge increases in that younger audience from it. The NFL does a really good job with that too, considering they're just kind of omnipresent in the States. But you see them doing a lot more now with gaming publishers. They have a Fortnite tie-up. They did a big Roblox tie-up around Super Bowl. And a lot of that is to continue to engage that younger fan base and keep them kind of coming into the sport in lieu of being able to go to an actual game. I think the stat at the NFL was 95% of the fans don't actually go to a game. So like, how are they getting into it? And those gaming extensions or YouTube deals or, highlights are ultimately what's helping you get into that, which is helpful. From an esports perspective, I think what's exciting is when I was at this esports team called G2, as you were saying, all of our players were able to basically practice virtually so their fans could watch them practice and chat with them while they practice. That's such a different relationship. And so as traditional sports looks at how do we keep this audience really engaged and into what we're doing, there's so much you can learn by building almost that one-to-one relationship with the younger fan at scale. And that's what I think is so powerful about gaming or esports more specifically, and what traditional sports is trying to figure out how to harness and do, but certainly something that us at McLaren are really focused on.
Yeah, I had this challenge a lot when I was at CAA because we had so many guys that wanted to be gamers and wanted to do the thing, right? If you want to be a full-time streamer and be successful on Twitch, you got to be regular, you got to be consistent, you got to be doing it 8 hours a day at the same day every single week at the same time. So we had a lot of guys who would start that during the off season and then like disappear, right? So when it comes to like athletes specifically and how they bridge that gap, it really is a hard thing to solve, right? How do you say take time away from your full-time job that pays you millions of dollars to pursue this thing that gives you a more engaged audience? It's a really hard argument to make. I think some people are doing it. Mookie Betts just launched a YouTube channel, which is a very big deal because YouTube is another platform where you need to have constant and consistent content, and especially as a baseball player, when you play 162 games a season, that's really, really difficult to do. So yeah, I always just wonder how we can bridge that, because I do think there are so many athletes out there that want that, but ultimately maybe don't have the time or can prioritize it.
You are starting to see those worlds merge, though. So one of our drivers is called Lando Norris, and he is one of the youngest drivers on the grid. We like to say he's really quite good, and he's a massive gamer. So he's got his own Twitch channel, and he's streaming on a pretty regular cadence. So he's got about 4 million followers on Twitch that he's constantly talking to and like, quote unquote, in his spare time. Now, our season's demanding. Formula One goes to 23 different markets a year. The season just started in Bahrain. We had a terrible race. Hopefully we'll get better next week. But they're going all over the world. So he's almost doing it in his spare time as he's traveling. So he's trying to like pull that together. And you're seeing more athletes and sports teams really lean into that to look at ways that they can tap into that space differently. But I think you're right. It's a total balance.
Yeah, so I'm going to switch gears for a second. I think that what is very endemic to gaming are collabs, right? I mean, Ninja and Drake played Fortnite together years ago, and it pretty much broke the internet, right? You see FaZe Clan doing Takashi Murakami drops, and right? Like, I think these collabs are something that I'm seeing a lot of sports teams do as well. So whether it's McLaren or something that you've seen, like what are some of your favorite collaborations that you see in gaming?
I won't give a McLaren example because that feels too obvious and like too arrogant. But I do think we do some cool stuff. A couple of the collabs that come out of the fashion world I think are really interesting. So a lot of the Gucci's of the world, Lacoste, they're looking at Minecraft. So Minecraft is interesting because it's this huge audience. If you've played Minecraft, there's actually no brand visibility really inside the maps and inside the game. Microsoft control that pretty tightly. But what Gucci and Lacoste have done is essentially create, I'm going to use a word I hate, but it's called like phygital items. So like you can buy them in real life and you can also buy them inside the server. And they've almost created an experience so you get to know the brand. They're really young people that are experiencing this. So it's almost like Lacoste and Gucci are building fans from a super young age, knowing that they have this big engagement and creating almost a new price point for them to buy product at. You buy the actual product inside the game, and then you get it delivered to you in real life. So it is a direct connection. They also do things where Lacoste specifically, I think, created some, we'll call them Easter eggs, like hidden Lacoste branded things inside the Minecraft server that if you noticed it, gets printed on the physical item that's delivered to you. That's cool. Like, I would like that, right? And so if you think of a 12-year-old, 15-year-old that's sort of engaging in the space, doesn't really know Lacoste, all of a sudden, you've just won somebody over because you've totally matched what they unearthed in-game to something in real life. So those types of collaborations, I think, are really interesting, maybe a bit more focused on gaming, but there seem to be a lot from the fashion space that I'd call as industry leading.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's especially interesting about a lot of high-end fashion brands, sorry, I know this is about sports and we're talking about fashion, but you know, if you think about like who's playing Roblox and who's playing Minecraft, they're pretty young, right? I don't think you have any expectation that the 7-year-old playing, you know, Roblox is going to be tapping their mom, asking them to buy them a Gucci bag, right? But I do think it's really interesting how these fashion brands, knowing that they are aspirational brands, are starting, I don't want to say get their claws in a younger generation, but they kind of are finding a way to market to the younger audience through gaming. I find that to be fascinating.
Yeah, and the key is you have to be really authentic. So when you're doing something like that, you have to make it kind of additive to that gamer, to that user experience. And a lot of what the fashion brands are doing is that. Part of why, and now I will humbly brag, our Roblox activity worked well is one of the biggest moments in the F1 season is when we launch our F1 car. It's like huge for our avid fans. It's the first time that you see the new design of the car, which is fully built from the ground up, about 300,000 proprietary pieces put into that car. So what we did is actually take that car and off of CAD drawings of the real car, built it inside Roblox so that people within that metaverse were able to drive the car before even Daniel and Lando could a couple years ago. And what that did is allow our fans to access something that even the drivers hadn't really accessed in real life. Now, it's still a video game version of the car. It's not the real life car. But that kind of insight, that added value, is why I think that worked so well. And that's what those fashion brands, I also think, are really leaning into well.
Yeah, so going back to this Roblox experience, which you can like just brag about, you don't have to humble brag. So, you know, you have to convince the rest of your company to invest in that. Yep. And look, it's not a cheap investment by any means. And when you're in gaming, you can't just do it one-off. You need to do it consistently. A lot of my job with brands is having one stakeholder who really believes in gaming and then us giving them the tools and the information to convince the rest of their leadership that gaming matters, right? So there are some challenges in that, right? So how have you, as really like, I feel like you're spearheading the gaming program for McLaren entirely. How are you getting the rest of your like peers and leadership to invest emotionally, physically, and monetarily into that?
That is a great question. That is, whenever it's a challenge for sure, but fortunately, Zach Brown, who's our CEO, is incredibly willing to be bold and take chances. So we were the first team to start like an Instagram account. We were the first team to go into F1 Esports because Zach saw that as an opportunity. When I took the Roblox concept to him and our chief comms officer at the time, they were like, what is Roblox and what are you talking about? And I was like, okay, let me break it down for you. And then if you look at the numbers in terms of how many people are, you know, engaging on Roblox on a daily active basis, they're insane. They're so big. It opens up such a different audience for us, and I think that really convinced him. And then the concept of how does this deliver against 3 criteria? And for us, it's fans, which this brings in new fans. It wasn't intended to engage existing fans. It was all about fan acquisition. And it wouldn't detract from the sort of experience for our most avid fans when they're watching ESPN or Sky Sports to unveil the car. The second was, how does it deliver for brand? And again, it shows this innovative, pioneering side of the brand, which is really core to who we are in terms of how we tried to build the car and how we tried to race. And then last, we looked at revenue, and this was not a cost or it was a costly endeavor. It wasn't a massive revenue generator. We did sell in-game items alongside the experience, but that's where we were willing to take more of a risk. And fortunately, I had senior or executive kind of support on doing that, and we saw it as a massive success, and we're the first team to do it. So now we are looking at what do we do next? How do we sort of take that to the next level? And hopefully, with you guys, you'll see something come out later this year.
Yeah, us too. So, you know, F1 is inherently global, but I think we see every single league, at least in the States, so MLB, NFL, doing international series, right? Capturing a global audience is very, very important in reaching a new audience. And gosh, like, the stats in gaming internationally are absolutely wild. Some of the most watched streamers on Twitch all speak Spanish. The mobile gaming market in Brazil and APAC is absolutely insane. So with your experience at G2, which really was more of a global esports team, right? Like, how can you know, traditional sports be leveraging what gaming can capture on a global level?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. So you've got cultural nuances and language differences, obviously. So G2 is based out of Berlin. They have about 7 different competitive teams underneath their portfolio, which span Fortnite into League of Legends. And those teams are based all over the place. So not just in Germany, it's Germany, New York, London, really everywhere. So the way that we went about it there, and this is really kind of core to the sort of esports audience, is digital first. So showcase absolutely everything you can. So we were fly on the wall content kind of obsessed. We did it for almost everything. So all of our fans all around the world could see what was happening at these places called gaming houses, which is where these gamers sort of train together and get ready to compete. We also were really obsessed with making sure that our players were streaming on Twitch. And so that was deliberate so that their audiences all around the world were able to engage with them at a regular cadence. So it was Monday through Thursday. They were streaming outside of practice and outside of their competition schedule. So it was a hell of a lot of work for them to maintain that. Transition to what we do now from a McLaren perspective, and we're constantly trying to figure out how we create more of a regular cadence of kind of live stream content that goes out to audiences all around the world. We're constantly looking at how do we become more obsessed with fly on the wall content. So basically take Drive to Survive fans and keep them coming into the funnel by looking at other sort of behind the scenes stories that we can tell them. And then how do we continue to sort of create this culture of engagement online? So what are we doing with YouTube? What are we doing with Twitch that allows us to go out to our audience globally? What we truly haven't yet cracked is language. You know, that's a real challenge. There's, as you said, we have a huge audience in Brazil and Mexico. Gaming's also big in those areas. And we only really have English-speaking channels right now, so it's an area that we're exploring. And then China is a whole other beast. And if I'm honest with you, you need I think you need local market experts to really help you unlock that market. And no one can really do it from a Western perspective because it's just too different. So that's sort of how we're looking at maybe 24, 25, how do we crack those markets?
Yeah, I fully agree with you on all of that. So you've mentioned Shadow a bit, but I want to give you an opportunity to brag about just and explain like really what Shadow is, what its goals are, what else you guys are working on, right?
Yeah. So McLaren Shadow is our sort of sub brand to McLaren Racing within the gaming and esports space. When we compete as an F1 esports team, which by the way, we won the championship last year, just saying, it was under McLaren Shadow. I really expected applause there, but that didn't happen.
There we go. Thank you.
So we're looking at everything that we do within gaming and esports as Shadow. And the reason for that is the gaming and esports audience requires you to be a little bit more, I'm going to say irreverent, more kind of real-time discourse where you're kind of talking back and forth versus just pushing content out at a fan base, which is more what you do as a traditional sports brand. And so my team oversees all of our channels, not just McLaren Shadow, but racing as well. And so there just are nuances. So as we look at Shadow as a business, it is how do we become synonymous with ultimately gaming culture? And how do we use the sim racing F1 esports side of what we do to be really authentic as we operate in the space? I think the other benefit we have is McLaren has some really cool cars, and those cars show up inside a lot of really cool video games. So we're already showing up in the gaming space in a really natural way. So you take that, you couple it with that F1 esports sort of authenticity, and then the fact that we have two drivers that are big gamers. So Lando's a massive gamer, streams on Twitch. Oscar Piastri, our new F1 driver, is also a big gamer. So all of a sudden we have the ingredients, I think, to be really kind of core to gaming culture as McLaren Shadow and maybe take some more risks within that and see how that performs. So that's ultimately the goal and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, you brought up a great point in that like authenticity piece, right? Like how do you speak to gamers the way they like to be spoken to? And you hit the nail on the head, on the coffin, whatever the saying is, that, you know, they're used to two-way communication. You know, this gaming audience doesn't want to be spoken at, they want to be spoken with, right? So where I see a lot of brands go wrong is they're making brands like they would any traditional entertainment audience, right? And they're making the stuff that works for them and not what works for the audience. So, you know, I wish more brands understood that. That's truly why I have a job, is helping brands understand that. But at a certain point, like there is, again, this fatigue of younger generations of just being spoken at and meant to passively retain things. They want to be a part of the conversation. I think you guys are doing a really good job thinking about that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks to you guys. I think you're right, but it's also like that's scary because sometimes you don't want to hear what they have to say, right? It's not always good stuff, and that's where going back to your question around how do you get senior leadership or the execs kind of on side with that, you have to sort of outline that this could be tough. Like there are going to be times where our community doesn't like what we're doing, and we just have to be nimble enough to react to that and pivot. And that is a very different mentality to traditional sports, right? Like as the NFL, how often did we pivot to what the audience, wanted us to do? Not very often. Like they still don't have to do that, to be fair. They don't need to. But within G2, when I was there, I'll never forget, we had this jersey launch that I was a part of. We released the jersey. Our fans, we had about 60 million fans like on our social channels collectively. They fucking hated it. And they told us they hated it. And my CEO was like freaking out. I think he fired me twice. And he was like, what are we going to do? And I was like, okay, we're going to change it. And we worked with Adidas to change a jersey. If anyone knows that world, it is like 12-month lead times for production and design, whatever. And we were still able to, within 48 hours, change a jersey from what it initially was to what it became because our fans hated it so much. That is an amazing sort of putting the fan at the core of what you're doing. And I would love traditional sports to be able to do that more. There's a whole myriad of reasons why that's tough. But I think it's a huge lesson in terms of that difference, as you were saying, between two-way communication versus just kind of giving them what you think they'll want based on maybe syndicated research and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, that's where when brands are interested in getting into the space, your first step as a brand or a league or a team and how you engage with gamers is really important, right? Because they will let you know if they don't like it. And they're going to remember if the brand felt inauthentic to them. So that's why understanding who your target consumer is from any perspective and understanding how that gamer behaves is critical to making sure that it's received and they're spoken to the way they like to be spoken to, right? So, for instance, Gillette is one of our clients. We manage their global gaming program. Their gamer, their target audience, or their target consumer is someone that's like 18 to 24, and that type of gamer likes a little bit more of a competitive esport, right? They like the first-person shooters. They like to be in it. So, building strategies around Fortnite makes a lot more sense than building something around Minecraft. Whereas, we have brands like Journeys who they celebrate the individual. They want their kids to feel like they can be expressive and be themselves. And guess what? That teen is not really playing League of Legends. They're the ones that are tuning into gaming because they want to know culturally what's cool. They're going to go on Twitch not to watch the person that is, playing Valorant for 8 hours a day, but is truly talking to their audiences every single day. Doesn't matter what game they're doing. It doesn't matter where in life they are. They're going to tune into this person. So, I just think that's super interesting. What's next for McLaren and McLaren Shadow and gaming? Can you reveal?
Next for McLaren is hopefully we get back to the front of the grid in Formula One, which we will be working on pretty hard as a race team over the next, call it, 6 weeks. So that's really important. F1 is still our hero property. So while we're competing in these other race series, right, a lot of focus is going into that. And then from McLaren Shadow's perspective, I think it's really more collaborations. It's more publisher kind of relationship. So how can McLaren Shadow show up inside video games, maybe alongside McLaren Racing? We're looking at different products. So can we actually release gamer headsets, things like that take some of our proprietary technology from Formula One, put it into a gaming headset, and allows people to sort of benefit from that and buy that. So we're looking at a lot of different things like that. The other sort of exciting piece is a lot of these big influencers that you see out there on YouTube, they don't really like to travel, as you know, because they lose money, right, if they are not behind the computer. But all of them seemingly want to come to some of our races. So we're working with Open World and some of our partners to try to get a lot of these big influencers into our garage at some of the F1 races. We had one of the, if you know Sidemen, they're like a big YouTube crew. We had one of them with us in Singapore last year, and it was wild because I actually think more people knew who he was than some of the drivers, which was F1 drivers, which was kind of crazy. But we're doing a lot of that to sort of grow our channels and get this gaming audience more into the space.
And as someone who is helping procure some of that talent for those races, it helps when you have a fantastic property like McLaren or F1. And at that point, when you get invited to a race, it's a flex. That's another thing that's very endemic to gaming culture is the flex, right? Did you get that mouse drop? Did you get that phase cleanser, right? All of those things. So, yeah.
The other thing that helps, right, is so I work on the racing side. The supercar business is a separate side of the business, but those cars are cool. So when you offer, you can drive one of our, I don't know, F1s or one of our GTs, for the weekend, along with coming to a race. It's a pretty cool package that tends to make a lot of these guys get out from behind their computer and come hang out with us for a few days.
It's true. That is a responsibility I don't know I personally would be willing to take on, but I'm really happy that these young 20-something-year-old boys feel comfortable doing that.
Heavy insurance signing things, so heavy insurance coverage, so we're okay.
We are wrapping up. Is there any last things, if we're thinking about this room of being a room, this lawn, of being a lot of people from the sports world, right? Like, what's the one last thing you would mention about gaming if they're thinking about being a part of it? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit.
Oh, I'm not ready for that question. That is a good one. I would say figure out who's the audience that you want to really kind of connect with. Understand how you can be really additive and authentic to them and create that two-way conversation. Because if you do speak at them, it won't work. If you do something that's really inauthentic, it also won't work. So I think those are probably the main things I'd say. And don't be scared to be bold. It is hard when you know your space, right? Formula One, NFL, we have a really regular season. It doesn't change year over year. It's the same thing. In gaming, everything changes all the time. So you have to be a little bit more nimble. And how you marry that with a big, maybe more traditional kind of approach in terms of your business is really hard. But once you figure that out, that's where you'll probably find most success.
I totally agree. And that's why, to come full circle, like why I'm so happy to be in this industry. Again, I will love the sports side forever. I hope to do more things where we get to intersect the two. But things are changing all the time. It's equal parts terrifying, but exciting. And it's really fun that we get to be a part of it. So that's it from us. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
Thank you.